I am Dahlia Morrow, 32 years old, and I grew up believing that family meant loyalty, that marriage meant forever, and that blood ties were sacred bonds no one would dare break. How spectacularly wrong I was. To outsiders, my life in Lyon seemed charmed. A beautiful townhouse near Parc de la Tête d'Or, a successful husband with his own architecture firm, and harmonious family dinners every Sunday. My husband, Laurent, was everything French mothers dreamed of for their daughters. Handsome, established, from a good family. But behind those elegant dinner parties and perfumed air kisses, a serpent was coiling, waiting to strike. I just never imagined the snake would share my last name and my Sunday table. I still remember that October evening with crystalline clarity. We were hosting our monthly family dinner, the dining room glowing with candlelight, my best china gleaming on the table. My sister-in-law, Camille, sat across from me, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the Hermès scarf I'd given her last Christmas. She'd always been beautiful in that calculating way, features arranged for maximum impact rather than natural grace. Laurent's younger sister had lived with us for 3 months after her divorce, crying on my shoulder about trust and betrayal. I'd held her through those tears, never suspecting she was studying my life like a blueprint for theft. The dinner conversation flowed with wine and laughter until Camille clinked her glass, standing with theatrical timing. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice trembling with what I thought was nervousness. "I'm pregnant." The table erupted in congratulations. Her parents beamed, reaching across to squeeze her hands. I started to rise, ready to embrace her, when she added the words that shattered my world like champagne flutes on marble, "And Laurent is the father." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my mother-in-law's eyes on me, watching for my reaction like a hawk studies prey. Laurent's face had gone pale, his architectural precision crumbling into chaos. But it was Camille's expression that burned into my memory, triumph disguised as vulnerability, victory wrapped in vintage Chanel. "Dahlia," Laurent began, his voice strangling on my name. "I can explain. 3 months," Camille interrupted, pressing a hand to her still flat stomach. "I'm 3 months along. We didn't mean for it to happen, but love doesn't follow rules." She looked directly at me then, and I saw the truth in her eyes. This was no accident. This was architecture more careful than any building Laurent had ever designed. I stood slowly, my body moving independently of my shattered mind. Placed my napkin beside my plate with the precision of a surgeon. "Congratulations," I said, my voice steady as a flatline. "I'm sure you'll be very happy." Then I walked to our bedroom, locked the door, and listened to the chaos explode below. Laurent's parents demanding explanations, his weak attempts at justification, Camille's perfectly timed sobs. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything, a habit from my work as a financial analyst serving me in ways I'd never imagined necessary. Laurent tried to talk to me that night, pounding on our bedroom door, alternating between apologies and accusations. She needed comfort after her divorce, he pleaded. "You were always working, always distant. It just happened." "For 3 months?" I asked through the door. "Multiple times just happened?" "The baby changes everything," he said, and I heard the resignation in his voice. "I have to do the right thing." The right thing. As if destroying our marriage for his sister was noble. As if I hadn't supported him through failed projects, held him through his father's criticism, believed in him when no one else would. As if our own son, 5-year-old Theo sleeping peacefully down the hall, didn't deserve a father who understood right from wrong. Laurent moved out the next morning, taking only a suitcase and his laptop, leaving behind 7 years of marriage like an abandoned blueprint. Camille had one, or so she thought. She moved into a flat Laurent rented near his office, playing house with my husband while I consulted with Marie Dubois, the sharpest divorce attorney in Lyon. "Standard infidelity case," Marie said, reviewing my documentation. "You'll get the house, shared custody, reasonable support." But I wasn't interested in reasonable. Not when my son asked why Papa didn't live with us anymore. Not when Camille posted ultrasound photos on Instagram with captions about unexpected blessings. Not when Laurent's family chose sides, and I found myself uninvited from the life I'd helped build. I played the abandoned wife perfectly. cried at school pickup, where other mothers clutched my hands and shared their own stories. Posted melancholy quotes about resilience on social media. Let mutual friends see me, trying to be strong for Theo, while shopping alone at the market where Lauren and I used to laugh over which cheese to buy. All while I hired a private investigator, tracked every euro Lauren spent on his new life, and waited. Because something felt wrong about Camille's pregnancy beyond the obvious betrayal. Her timing was too perfect, her symptoms too performed, her doctor's appointments surprisingly vague. The truth revealed itself 4 months later, in the most mundane way possible. Camille's friend Sylvie, drunk at a wine bar, let slip to a mutual acquaintance that Camille had been planning this coup since her divorce. She always wanted what Dahlia had, Sylvie slurred. Said she deserved it more. The pregnancy was genius. Who leaves a pregnant woman? The words reached me within hours. Lion's gossip network more efficient than any surveillance system. But I needed proof, not rumors. So I had my investigator dig deeper, follow closer, ask the right questions in the right places. What he discovered exceeded even my cynical expectations. Camille wasn't pregnant. Had never been pregnant. The ultrasounds were fake, purchased online from a website that sold false medical documents. The morning sickness was performed. The doctor's appointments were brunches with friends. The growing belly was a combination of strategic clothing and prosthetics ordered from a theatrical supply company. She'd studied pregnancy like a method actress, convincing even Lauren with her dedication to the role. But the most damning evidence was the email trail my investigator uncovered. Messages between Camille and her best friend detailing the entire plan, sent weeks before that first accidental encounter with Lauren. Phase 1. Create opportunity for closeness. Phase 2. Seduce him. Men are weak when they feel needed. Phase 3. Announce pregnancy publicly to force his hand. Phase 4. Wait until divorce finalized, then miscarry tragically. Phase 5. Keep Lauren through trauma bonding. There it was in black and white. My life destroyed by a 5-phase plan discussed like a business strategy. I printed everything, my hands steady despite the rage burning through my veins. Then I called Marie. Change of plans, I said. We're going nuclear. The countersuit was a work of art. Fraud, emotional distress, conspiracy to commit deception, alienation of affection. Marie threw every possible charge at both Camille and Lauren. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Lauren's face when presented with the proof in his lawyer's office was almost worth the pain, watching him realize he destroyed his family for a lie, traded reality for performance, chosen manipulation over marriage. She said she was pregnant, he whispered, staring at the fake ultrasounds. I saw the tests. You saw what she wanted you to see, I replied calmly. Just like you showed me what I wanted to see. A faithful husband, a loving family, a future that apparently meant nothing the moment your sister played damsel in distress. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Camille tried to claim mental distress from her divorce, temporary insanity, anything to excuse the elaborate deception. But the emails were too detailed, the planning too meticulous, the execution too calculated to claim madness. Lauren, realizing he'd been played, tried to reconcile, showing up at the house with flowers and tears. Dahlia, please. I made a terrible mistake. I love you. I love our family. You loved an illusion, I said, not opening the door fully. Just like I did. The difference is, I wasn't the one who chose to believe a lie over 7 years of truth. The court wasn't sympathetic to Lauren's position. He'd abandoned his family for an affair with his sister, pregnant or not. The fact that he'd been deceived didn't erase his betrayal, it only highlighted his weakness. Marie systematically destroyed their defense, presenting evidence of Lauren's financial support of Camille during the fake pregnancy, proof of their continued relationship even after doubts should have surfaced, documentation of the emotional trauma inflicted on both me and Theo. My client didn't just lose a husband, Marie argued. She lost her family structure, her social standing, her trust in basic human decency. Her young son lost his father to a theatrical performance that valued drama over truth. The judgment was everything I'd hoped for, and more. The townhouse, bought before marriage but renovated with marital funds, remained mine entirely. The vacation home in Provence, purchased during our marriage, also transferred to my sole ownership. Full custody of Theo, with Laurent granted supervised visitation. The court deemed his judgment too questionable for unsupervised access. Substantial alimony and child support, calculated not just on his income but on the lifestyle established during the marriage that he'd unilaterally destroyed. But the cherry on top was the damages awarded for emotional distress and fraud, a sum large enough that Laurent would be paying for his sister's performance for the next decade. Camille faced her own consequences. Criminal charges for fraud were filed, though she avoided jail time through a plea deal that included mandatory psychiatric treatment and financial restitution. Her reputation in Lyon was destroyed. The woman who faked a pregnancy to steal her brother became a cautionary tale whispered at dinner parties. She moved to Marseille, claiming she needed a fresh start, but social media has a long memory and screenshots last forever. Laurent's architecture firm suffered as clients questioned the judgment of a man so easily deceived. He moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, his Mercedes replaced with a Renault, his bespoke suits hanging in a closet he could no longer afford to fill. The real victory wasn't financial. It was the slow realization spreading through Laurent's family about what they'd supported. His parents, who'd chosen their daughter's lies over their grandson's stability, found themselves restricted to supervised visits as well. The extended family who'd rallied around Camille's pregnancy discovered they'd been defending a con artist. One by one, they reached out with apologies I didn't need and explanations I didn't want. I was polite but distant. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give when they'd so easily discarded 7 years of family bonds for 3 months of manufactured drama. I kept the tears flowing at strategic moments, during the custody evaluation, at the financial assessment meetings, in front of the judge when describing how Theo still asked when Papa and Tante Camille's baby would visit. Let them see the grieving wife, the confused mother, the woman destroyed by deception. All while my lawyer systematically transferred every asset, secured every advantage, built a fortress of legal protections around the life they'd try to steal. By the time my tears dried, I owned everything they'd valued, and they were left with nothing but the consequences of their choices. The most satisfying moment came a year later. I was having lunch at a bistro near the Musée des Beaux-Arts when Laurent approached my table. He looked older, grayer, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with his cheaper clothes. "May I?" He gestured to the empty chair. I nodded, curious despite myself. "I wanted you to know," he began, then stopped, searching for words his architect's precision couldn't provide. Camille admitted everything. Not just the pregnancy. She planned it all. Studied our routines, knew when you'd be working late, even researched which cologne you found attractive so she could wear it. He laughed bitterly. I threw away everything for someone playing a role written specifically to destroy us. "And you want what?" I asked, cutting my salad with deliberate calm. "Forgiveness? Understanding? A second chance." "I want you to know I know," he said simply. "That I understand the magnitude of what I destroyed. That Theo deserves better than a father who could be so easily manipulated. That you deserved better than a husband who valued fantasy over reality." Yes, I agreed. I did. Which is why I now have everything we built while you have supervised visits and garnished wages. Seems fair, considering you chose a 3-month lie over a 7-year truth. He left without ordering, shoulders bent under the weight of understanding that came too late. I finished my lunch in peace, then picked up Theo from school, his hand warm in mine as he chattered about his art project. We went home to our townhouse, where his laughter filled rooms that no longer echoed with betrayal. I redecorated slowly, erasing traces of the life that included Laurent and Camille. The dining room where she'd made her announcement became a library where Theo and I read stories. The guest room where she'd stayed became my home office where I managed investments grown fat on divorce settlements. The master bedroom where Laurent had packed his suitcase became a sanctuary decorated exactly to my taste, with no compromises for someone else's preferences. Each change was a small victory, a reclaiming of space and self that their performance had tried to steal. Friends asked if I was bitter, if carrying such anger was healthy. But I wasn't angry anymore, I was educated. I'd learned that family could be weaponized, that trust could be performed, that some people viewed relationships as stages for their personal dramas rather than sacred bonds to protect. I'd learned to document everything, trust carefully, and recognize that tears could be as strategic as any legal maneuver. Most importantly, I'd learned that when someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them the first time, not the performance they're selling. I am Dahlia Morrow. They faked a pregnancy to steal my husband, never expecting that I could fake tears while taking everything. My husband fell for theatrical morning sickness and prosthetic baby bumps, while I fell back on legal precedent and financial documentation. They thought they were directors of some grand dramatic production, casting me as the abandoned wife who'd exit stage left with dignity. Instead, I rewrote the script, hired better lawyers than actors, and ensured the final act left me owning the theater itself. Because in the end, the only performance that mattered was the one in court, where evidence outweighed emotions and facts trumped fiction. And that's a show I was born to star in, even if I had to cry on cue to get the standing ovation I deserved.